Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. We're recording on a Monday afternoon, and my name is Steven Railston, and we're coming to you after Manchester United were defeated 1-0 down in London, back-to-back defeats in the Premier League, Brighton, then to West Ham. And it was a very, very disappointing afternoon, a really bad mistake from David De Gea, as we'll discuss throughout the next 40 minutes, and I'm sure we'll get stuck in because it was that bad. I'm with Samuel Luckhurst and Tyrone Marshall, my two colleagues who are at the London Stadium down in the capital. Again, they've been all over the place in the last few weeks. So Samuel, how are you first before we get stuck into it?
I'm very well, thank you. I think my southern roots have really gone to the core this week. We even had bangers and mash and mushy peas at half time at West Ham. I was expecting jellied eels to be served. Sorry, that was before the game. I was expecting jelly eels to be served at half time. But if anyone's actually been there, you'll realise what a pain it is to get back down to the press room. It's not the best infrastructure at London Stadium.
Did you bring your binoculars, Samuel?
I didn't. But
needed at the London Stadium,
I think we're certainly linesman material, because we could see that the ball had gone out for that
Antonio
kick,
trusted
which the linesman somehow managed to miss. But it's not the. It's a very different experience going to West Ham compared to going to West Ham when they played at the Boleyn ground, mostly for the better. But in terms of I suppose from the purist aspect of it, it's not the best. It is quite a sterile environment.
Did you enjoy the food, the on-brand food in the press box yesterday, Ty?
I did, yeah. It felt like a very Cockney day, to be honest. What with the bangers and mash, it feels to me like West Ham are like the London
bunting
club, aren't they?
Yeah.
The bunting, they are the epitome of like of London to me. That is the most London club. Certainly in the top flight, you can get a stirring rendition of the national anthem if you're into that sort of thing. And it's fair to say the away end wasn't particularly into that sort of thing. And I did enjoy, actually. I was I didn't tell Samuel this, but I was getting on the underground to go to Stratford to West Ham's ground and getting on sort of East London already in Aldgate, and there was an old boy on the underground platform wearing his sharp suit, Trilby hat on still, must have been 70s or 80s, walking around muttering to himself that he was going to break various people's legs. Anyone who went near him was going to get his head kicked in. It was like he was a gangster who couldn't part with his ways. I'm sure 30 years ago he was probably mates with Ronnie Craig, but didn't have quite the same intimidation factor, but he had a pure London accent and just walking around muttering that people were going to have their legs broken and all sorts done to them. And it was quite funny more than
there's some bizarre characters in London. There is that. When I was there the other month, I walked past this guy. I'm coming home from my night out, and he was saying some things to me that I can't repeat. And he definitely had a few glasses of wine, as referenced on the last podcast for Poland. So maybe something else. Anyways, we had to discuss the football today, not the funny characters in the capital. And there's only one place to start, Samuel, and that's obviously David De Gea. He made that mistake in the 26th minute. Benrahma's through into the half, and he's surrounded by players. There's around 4 or 5 players around him. They invite him to shoot because they think De Gea's going to have this covered. It's no problem. And Benrahma hits it. It trickles. It's a poor shot. It's almost like a pass. And somehow it trickles over De Gea's hands. I don't think West Ham fans thought it was going to go in. I don't think Benrahma thought it was going in. I don't think anyone in the stadium, you guys in the press box, thought it was going to go in. Somehow it did. De Gea's face first in the grass, lying down. Rashford's got his hands on his head. It was disastrous, wasn't it, Samuel? And if they continue with him next season, that is surely going to be a colossal mistake.
Well, when it went in, there was some in the press box who instinctively put their their hands to their head out of disbelief, out of sympathy. I think it was more the disbelief of it. And I think Rob Dawson, who was sat behind us, he tweeted that there were even like some sighs from West Ham fans in the immediate reaction to Said Benrahma's shot, because they just dismissed it as a back pass that was harmless. I mean, I remember years ago, Tyrone might remember in the 90s, Stan Collymore at Ewood Park, he had this shot that was going at a similar rate of knots, really, or lack of knots. And because of the bobble, it went over Tim Flowers and it went in, and Collymore had actually turned away. So he didn't see it go in, and he turned around. He was absolutely astounded that he'd been credited with a goal. Benrahma at least was facing De Gea, so he did see it go in. But it was just, I mean, it is inexplicable. There's no... trying to explain it is pretty difficult, really. I mean, sometimes a keeper. I mean, Massimo Taibbi did this after his infamous howler against Matt Letizia, where it's almost the cliche that the keeper checks their studs as if the studs are to blame. But when you look at the replay, it's nothing to do with the studs. It's nothing to do with the turf. It's just the keeper has just badly misjudged it. He doesn't move his feet quickly enough, which is a criticism that has been levelled at De Gea a number of times in recent seasons. But he still gets a hand to it, and I can't understand how the ball has gone through his hand there. And sometimes that happens with a goalkeeping error. One of De Gea's worst at Watford a few years ago, Ty coined the phrase, he had hologram hands for that one. And De Gea's immediately, a goalkeeper knows when it's solely their fault, because they try to bury their face in the turf. It's like they're a mole trying to dig a hole there. And it was just surreal. It was like a tail ender coming up against a bowler and completely misreading a slow delivery and being bowled out. It was bizarre, and the ramifications of it were felt by United because they lost the game. Up until then, I thought they played quite decently. They created opportunities. We shouldn't overlook the fact that their profligacy was a really big problem again. And the atmosphere at that stadium it can be humdrum. It has improved in recent years after a couple of difficult years for West Ham fans adjusting to the stadium and still pining for the Berlin ground. And I suppose where they've got the semi-final against AZ Alkmaar at home on Thursday, that's the game that is going to stir them more. But after the goal went in, the atmosphere, the crowd were lifted by it. It's a strange atmosphere anyway, just because it was a stadium that was built for the Olympics, and the away section is very bizarre. That it's divided into two, and you're kind of separated by this rather expansive platform, which I think is where the Olympic flame rested during the 2012 games. So it's difficult to generate an atmosphere anyway. But De Gea lifted West Ham. West Ham were the better team after the goal went in, and United, again, it was somewhat similar to Brentford in a strange way, in that although they didn't get battered and they only lost 1-0, the goalkeeper dropped a dolly and the players didn't have the coping mechanisms to recover from that setback. And there have been games this season that United have won from losing. But watching them now, all of a sudden, you don't really expect them to salvage games. And my piece, which is the aim is to get it live not long after the final whistle. It was pretty much done before full time, because the way the game was panning out, I just didn't see United getting anything from it. And again, the mental fragility of this team, although the mentality has improved this season, there is still a hell of a long way to go there, because it's not where it needs to be. There are too many characters who aren't up to it, and we'll get more into it regarding De Gea. But when you've got problems at both ends of forwards not scoring goals, and you've got a goalkeeper who has dropped too many clangers really in one season, then if that form or lack of form is being sustained, you are not going to be winning any games.
Players didn't respond, Ty, obviously after the mistake, as Samuel said, and it decided the game. But we're here talking about De Gea again, just weeks after the Sevilla game, where his performance was awful. The pass to Harry Maguire, that was obviously, we discussed that and who was to blame. But then the third goal, when he kind of rushed out, and it was bizarre, that miss kick, just almost as bizarre as this save or lack of save against West Ham. And we discussed his kind of contract negotiations, and look, he's still in talks with the club, and his contract expires at the end of the season. But surely it's kind of contradictory of what Ten Hag stands for. He's supposed to be this ruthless manager that has high standards, and currently at the moment, De Gea isn't meeting those standards. And I argued in my piece this afternoon that it's going to put his rebuild at risk, isn't it? Because if he continues with De Gea, surely that's going to limit the progress this team can make, because he's quite deeply flawed as a goalkeeper in 2023.
Yeah, his job role has moved on, certainly at the highest level from what he can offer. I mean, he began both halves last night by passing straight to a West Ham player, Declan Rice in the first half and Antonio in the second. And he's clearly a compromise for Ten Hag. He doesn't fit what he really wants from a goalkeeper. Tanaga's had to compromise and has basically accepted that he's an elite shot stopper and just isn't great with his feet. But at the moment, he's making errors with his feet and errors with his hands, and it is becoming a problem. The issue is, you're right, it does compromise his rebuild, but the reality is a rebuild can't be completed in 2 summers, really. United, we know they are, certainly in January, they were sailing close to the wind with FFP. No matter who owns the club this summer, I don't think there's going to be a war chest. I think, look at the way Newcastle have approached it. Those days are over, really, with the cost controls now and FFP. Even if Qatar come in, they're not going to hand Ten Hag 500 million and say, go and spend it, because it's just not doable the way that the FFP and certainly the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules and things like that and UEFA's new rules run. I don't think you can really get away with it. So the priority is a striker this year, and everyone knows that. And it's difficult to see how they get a striker and a goalkeeper and maybe another midfielder. I think they probably need a younger midfielder in there. So there are lots of things that need doing, but with the budget the way it is, it just can't be done in one window. So if money was no object, I think De Gea's contract would be expiring. There'd be a fitting farewell for someone who will go down in the club's history for sure. He set a new record last night of most appearances for a goalkeeper. He's well over 500 now. I think he's in or close to the top 10 of appearances. And he has, he's saved United more times than he's cost them. Let's be honest. In terms of his career at the club, he's in credit. And if money was no object, there'd be a fitting farewell on that Fulham game, and it would be let's move on. But money is an object, and I just don't think there's a way to make it work this summer. I think possibly the most likely scenario is, I just written a piece on this, is that we end up in a situation that 2 years ago Solskjaer basically said was unsustainable, and that next year we'll have De Gea and Henderson at the club all season, vying to be number one still.
That'll be fun again, won't it?
It seems destined to go on forever. That you've got to feel sorry in a way for Dean Henderson. I mean, I think he'd be number one now if it wasn't for COVID. He was told he was going to be number one in 2021-22. Tom Eaton was signed to be number two. I think De Gea would have gone on loan or been sold permanently. Henderson got COVID. De Gea started that season really well. Now Henderson's been doing great at Forest. Would probably have got a move this summer, but is going to miss 6 months through injury. He's only going to be back maybe late July. And at that point, there's very few well-run clubs who are looking for a goalkeeper. You have your goalkeepers set in stone by June, really. If you're still looking for a goalkeeper in late July or early August, then you're doing things wrong. And I don't think a club can necessarily bank on Henderson being fit for the start of August when he's had an operation and has had this injury for 6 months. So there's probably a decent chance he will end up staying at United. But maybe all this misfortune pays him back at some point, and he ends up staying. He gets a chance in the team, and he does become number one. But I think that's the only real way we're going to see a change, unless they sign a keeper on a free or for £10 million this summer, who turns out to be an absolute bargain. I don't think there's an ideal solution this summer to the problem, but it is certainly becoming a problem because De Gea's in the same kind of slump. I mean, Samuel said it well last night. The last time De Gea finished the season this badly, he got a new contract in 2019, I think it was, wasn't it? So
it was,
the same thing is quite probably going to happen again. That he is rewarded for mediocrity at times with those spells, but it's a difficult situation for the club to be in because, like I say, there isn't a perfect solution.
Samuel, do you think we could generally see Dean Henderson then? Because I've kind of played devil's advocate in this podcast time and time again this season. And when I've ever mentioned Henderson, I think you both have been, come on, is what he said when he left the club. It seemed like he burnt his bridges because he did support us, and he strays a line between confidence and arrogance, doesn't he, at times, and perhaps sometimes misplaced for what he's achieved. He's had, I guess, an all right spell in Nottingham Forest, some good individual performances, but he's still obviously conceded a lot of goals, such as their form and where they're on the table. But could we see, obviously, De Gea leave and Henderson become number one? Because I guess that for me is maybe the most pragmatic option, because Henderson's going to be there. You don't have to buy him for anything. He's already on the books. And you could allow De Gea to leave, and then you could strengthen other positions with that money you would have used to sign a new goalkeeper.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, I've done the I've done the story today. I was sent the message during the game last night that for the first time, I'm not as certain De Gea will sign a new contract at United, because there are genuine doubts at the club over whether to continue with trying to time down on a new deal, and also whether he should be number one. I think when Ten Hag replied to a question about De Gea's future last night and said that we want him to extend his contract, it was actually in reply to a question that said, will he be your number one next season? He didn't actually say that he would. So there is a prospect, I suppose. It seems very fanciful, but I suppose there's a possibility that De Gea signs a new contract and he's not United's number one next season, or at some point during the season he is phased out. For who, I have absolutely no idea, because I do not see United, as Ty said, in the same summer signing you're talking about a new spine altogether, almost, a striker, a midfielder and a goalkeeper. It's very, very difficult to identify a goalkeeper who is ready-made for the Premier League and also ready-made to replace De Gea. I suppose when United replaced Edwin van der Sar, De Gea, you wouldn't have necessarily said he was ready-made. I think he was about 20 or 21 at that time, and he hadn't had a lot of football with Atletico Madrid, maybe 18 months. So he was a very raw recruit, and it was a fabulous investment. He's been a great player for them. But if I was, I suppose, football director, I don't think John Murtaugh's really got quite the clout to tell Eric Ten Hag what to do. But I suppose if you were to take American parlance and talk about a general manager, where they do have a bit more authority over the coach in various American sports, you would say, what we're going to do is we're going to release the goalkeeper who is frankly past it and is limited. The goalkeeper we've got already as a potential succession plan, because we can't invest in signing a new goalkeeper this summer given priority positions elsewhere. We're going to give him one season for him to show that he's up to it as a Man United number one. If he isn't up to it, there is still enough time in his contract to sell him, make a good, get good money for him next year, and use that money to invest in a new long-term goalkeeper. That's the way I think United should go about it. But already we're in this position where it would have been logical just to have extended De Gea's contract by one more year. That is the last contract-related extension he gets. You kick that can down the road, and next summer is the summer where he's let go for good, and then you sign a new goalkeeper. But the fact that they have been actively trying to negotiate a new contract with him on a reduced salary, I mean, that is an admission of his decline. I cannot think, if either of you can think of an example, shout it out. I cannot think of a club negotiating a new contract with a certain starter, but for that new contract to put him on a reduced salary. Normally, it's always a bump up of some sort. With De Gea, they're acknowledging you're not as good as you used to be, so we want to get you on a lower salary. So, the answer is staring them in the face, and really they should just be releasing him this summer, and maybe they will do. As I said, I've done that story today about the doubts at the club, and really, given his form over the last month, it would feel extremely incongruous over the next 7 or 8 weeks for United to come out and announce, we're delighted to announce that David De Gea has extended his contract by another 3 years, and they can talk. And Ten Hag, I mean, his form is such a problem that Ten Hag has a stock answer for when questions are raised about his future, which is, well, he's got the highest number of clean sheets in the Premier League this season, which he absolutely has. And ironically enough, he's had a couple of match-winning performances against West Ham this season as well, in the Premier League and in the FA Cup. They were two of his best performances. But that clean sheet record belongs as much to Rafael Varane, Lisandro Martinez and Luke Shaw, pretty much the three near constants in the defence this season. Diogo Dalot contributed to it in the first months of the season. Even Tyrell Malacia has contributed to it in a few games this season. It is a collective effort. But when you boil down to De Gea as an individual, if his shot stopping isn't at its optimum, there's nothing redeemable about his game anymore, unfortunately. Sevilla exposed that with all 3 goals in the second leg. He can't pass. He's not commanding at set pieces, which again West Ham preyed upon on Sunday night, and he's a disaster when he comes outside the area. Unfortunately, for a once great goalkeeper, and I'd always say between 2014 and 2018 he was the best goalkeeper in the world, but in the last 5 years he has been eclipsed by Alisson and Edison in the Premier League, and there are other goalkeepers out there who are just better than him now.
Tell you what, he was quite a lucky boy in my opinion as well when Antonio turned it in the back of the net. It's very soft, that foul, in my opinion. Obviously, he got given, he was relieved.
There was certainly an element of play acting that probably got the foul, but
I think when he makes a mistake, it really shakes
given.
him, and he looks low on confidence. And when he was coming to his corners, I mean, he's not the most authoritative anyways, is he? Let's face it. But there was another time when he kind of went down. He was looking for a free kick, and he didn't get it. And he was kind of a bit shocked at that.
He stayed down, expecting play to stop. If
that
West Ham
ended with Souček scoring as well, I think, didn't it? That
the offside, yeah.
When he was offside.
Yeah, I think you're right. He went back out and crossed it in, didn't he? Yeah.
Went back out and crossed it
That's
in.
right,
I mean, it was in off the post. He couldn't have saved it, and it was offside anyway. But you are taking a risk when you go down and stay down looking for it.
Ty, you played goalkeeper in the media game. Let's get you in between the sticks, eh?
Yeah, well, I said to Samuel last night, the media game's shaping up to be a trial at this race.
That should be a new piece, yeah. We'll leave it there for part 1. We'll be back in a moment for part 2. Now, I am conscious of this becoming a De Gea special, which it won't be. But I did want to ask you about Ten Hag's comments.
An emergency podcast.
just a special one. Because obviously Ten Hag came out and he backed them in his press conference. Now, I guess it was kind of, I'd say probably not surprising really, because United have got 5 games remaining, including an FA Cup final. And he's not exactly going to come out and hang his goalkeeper to dry, is he, when they've got 5 games to play. So do you think he was perhaps not being the most sincere with those comments and backing him because he knows he needs to keep his goalkeeper relatively confident coming into the end of the season, and then obviously maybe with a view to making a decision on his future, reevaluating his future at the end of the season?
The thing with Ten Hag is there's been times this season where he's been really critical of the collective and the team and how things have gone wrong, and when they've not been good enough after those heavy defeats. Recent comments about the mentality in games not being good enough. I can't recall many occasions when he's thrown players under the bus sort of individually for mistakes. He doesn't seem to do that a lot. He's been critical of players who've sort of breached disciplinary rules and things like that, but when it comes to mistakes on the pitch, I can't really recall him being critical of individuals. It's more a collective thing when he kind of goes for them in press conferences. So I guess that's just kind of his approach to it. And I mean, De Gea's the obvious talking point, but I don't think he was ever going to come out and say, "Yeah, it's not good enough." And like you say, you mentioned there, Stephen, previously, his confidence. That his confidence is probably low at the moment. We were talking last night about how he'd fronted up after the Brentford game at the start of the season, and he'd asked to speak to broadcasters. He asked to speak to travelling journalists who were down there. But you can't keep doing that after every mistake. Really, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as much as fans want to hear players go, "Yeah, sorry, I messed up for that one," if you keep doing it, fans just want to hear players stop making mistakes, basically. So I'm sure his confidence is brittle at the moment, and that was probably Ten Hag's way of dealing with it. But like I say, I can't, Samuel's got a much better memory for these things than me, but I can't recall many instances or any of Ten Hag sort of being critical of individual players this season for on-pitch errors.
We'll move on then, because it probably is time to move on. I think we're 25 minutes in, and we've all just discussed David De Gea. So we'll discuss the approach, Samuel, really, because Weghorst, he started central attacking midfield as the number 10, which was a bit of a surprise, actually. And obviously Fernandes was on the left with Anthony on the right and Rashford through the middle. What did you make of that? Because for me, I would have had... Well, I wouldn't have started Weghorst to begin with, to be fair. It was his first start since Newcastle, but I would have had Fernandes as the number 10. Were you surprised at yourself when you saw the teams were confirmed before kick-off. Well, it was only really
yes, I don't
became
think.
clear they were lined up like that after kick-off, because we thought Weghorst was leading the line.
Yeah, I don't think anybody anticipated that Weghorst would start after watching him up at Newcastle. I didn't think he'd actually start again for United because he was so hopeless in that game. I mean, his actual performance level yesterday was okay. His link up play was better than it had been in some of the more recent performances. It was more like at the start of his United career when he had quite a decent and quick understanding. I think after 70 minutes, he was probably the only United player who'd had a clean attempt on target as well. The trouble is that when he plays, nobody expects him to score, and he didn't score again. And it's 2 tap-ins in 27 games. He was applauded appreciatively by the United supporters because the commitment, he never lacks for that. And very early on, he spared De Gea's blushes after his first kick out was intercepted by Declan Rice. He chased back and he won the goal kick, and that's always going to go a long way with the match goers, and that's probably why they warm to him more than Marshall, because with Marshall the quality is undeniable, as you saw when he is on it, and in that run in added time where he linked up brilliantly with Rashford for the best piece of play, but he just doesn't exert himself anywhere near often enough, whereas Weghorst does. He does put a shift in every game. But the trouble is United have got this, they're in this merry-go-round at the moment, and Ty said about it before the game kicked off, that they've started 3 different strikers in their last 3 games. They've only scored 1 goal in those games, which was Fernandez's deflection against Villa, which was also on the rebound from a goalkeeping error by Emiliano Martinez. And as brilliant a season as Marcus Rashford has had, he's scored 5 goals in his last 17 games now, which is a meagre return, and also it's coming at exactly the wrong time. The pressure really does build up at this time of the year. I think we've seen signs in Ten Hag's management that he's finding the experience of managing United in April and May to be extremely different to managing Ajax in April and May. With Ajax, I mean, it's very the expectations are not particularly high there, and they certainly rode the crest of a wave when they got to the Champions League semi-finals. With United coming into April, there's been the prospect of winning 2 trophies. The consensus all along has been that they should rather comfortably get top 4, but they're doing their utmost to make that as tight a finish as possible. And I think the pressure is telling on a number of individuals and maybe the squad as a whole. We've spoken about the character defects that are still lingering there. I don't think Ten Hag is necessarily one of the figures who has a character defect. I think that the way he's managed this season, by and large, has been exceptional, and he's certainly made United a better team. That they have got a better mentality, they have got better characters, but they are still a long way off from where they need to be. And with his game management, that was somewhat of an issue again yesterday, in that you've got Garnacho there who won the game against West Ham in the FA Cup, and he's not used, and that was topical enough for Ten Hag to be asked about it at his post-match press conference, and he said with some justification that Sancho, Marshall, Sabitzer were good options. They're all properly fit as well because they've not been injured of late, and they've been available, so they're liable to be fresher than Garnacho. But still, Garnacho is probably he's probably had the more pivotal impact as a game changer off the bench this season than Sancho and Marshall, and it's a peculiar quandary Ten Hag has there. He's got 3 forwards. All of them, their best impacts this season have come off the bench. But unfortunately for United yesterday, Sancho and Marshall, Sancho did next to nothing. Marshall had 2 very good chances in added time. But again, that's got to be part of the frustration for Ten Hag, in that second half, United seemed to just meander through it until it was announced that there was 8 minutes of added time. And all of a sudden, Marshall did that link-up play with Rashford and had an opportunity to make it 1-1. For whatever reason that they did meander through that half, I don't know. I mean, when they were coming out of the tunnel, I think it was Lindelof, Fernandez and Casemiro were chatting with each other, strategizing. De Gea was having a chat with Rashford. Benny McCarthy had his arm round and was advising Anthony, and it was all talk but no action. And you wonder, okay, they're bound to be a little bit fatigued in a season that has been taxing, and it doesn't help that the Premier League have saddled them with Thursday night games as well as the Europa League. United only have themselves to blame for the Europa League schedule, but I think they're entitled to be a bit annoyed that the Premier League have given them, I think, it'll be 4 Thursday night matches by the end of the season, which is an unusually high amount. But that's not an excuse for why they're in the position they're in at the moment. And unfortunately, for United, they are in danger of bottling it in the top 4. And if they don't get top 4, they will have bottled it. I mean, there have been a lot of contrary takes about Arsenal and their form falling off a cliff and how they've not been bottling it. Actually, well, they have been bottling it. They had a very, very good lead, and they've lost their nerve at exactly the wrong time. And that's the case with United at the moment. It's just as well for them that they've got with 3 of their last 4 league games, 3 of them are at home because their away form again it's pretty dismal.
I agree with Garnacho. I think he would have added something different in that game yesterday. They were getting to the final third, and they just seemed kind of run out of ideas, devoid of creativity. I think he would have added something different, sped it up a bit, added a bit of energy, and he's very direct, isn't he? Which I think would work quite well.
It was
Samuel
a very
sorry, Ty.
Sorry. I was going to say it was a very slow performance. They didn't feel like there was much pace in it at all. They moved the ball really slowly through midfield. Yeah. They allowed West Ham to get set, and like you say, Garnacho would have done something different. And as much as we're critical of the goalkeeper, critical of a lack of firepower, there's an issue definitely in midfield as well. I think, in that Casemiro's playing as badly as at any point of the season. Eriksen's not been as good since he returned as he was before his injury, and that's kind of showing. You've got 2 31-year-olds who are losing form at the wrong time, and suddenly United's midfield looks more vulnerable than it has done at any stage of the season, really.
How much does fatigue got to do with that then, Ty? Because they've played 57 games this season. They played 49 in the entirety of last season, so it just shows you. And they've kind of played these double weeks since almost January, back to back, Thursday, Sunday. I mean, if I'm feeling a bit tired in this long season, and I'm only just typing on my laptop, surely it's starting to catch up to the players at this point.
Yeah, but I've seen your lifestyle, Stephen. It's not right. You started to
be a fast young Tyrone.
Yeah, I think. There's certainly an argument that there's fatigue in there. They have had a tough season. They do look tired. Even David Moyes was feeling sorry for them last night. Although I think within that comment from Moyes is quite a lot of pointing, going, look how hard Thursday, Sunday is, lads. That's why we're in the bottom half this season when we've had to do that. I think it's probably a nice way for him to shine a light on why West Ham haven't been as good as maybe expected. But they are undeniably tired. They do look fatigued. But if the FA Cup final will be United's 62nd game this season. I think City will play 61, maybe going for the treble, or maybe it'll be 63 actually. But either way, it's very close. They've played virtually the same number of games. Does City look tired? No, I wouldn't say so. They look fitter than any other team in the league. Because they've got the best squad in the world,
don't they? They seem to be peaking at the right time as well this season.
Well, yeah, but they haven't got a deep squad at City by any stretch of the imagination, really.
I have to disagree, Ty.
I don't think they have got that deeper squad. They've got good rotation options, but they've not got a deep squad compared to, say, Liverpool. Liverpool have got a deeper squad than City. They've probably got 17 outfield players, 18 outfield players they use regularly. But beyond that, I don't think there's loads. I mean, we talk about Fernandes. I would wager that Rodri's played more minutes than Fernandes this season, mostly because Calvin Phillips has not been fit and not been good enough. So, I don't think there's much of a contrast between. I don't think you'd find United players have played more minutes than City across the board. I think it'd be quite close. And City's players don't look tired. They're playing as well as they have done all season and with more intensity than they have done all season. So, yes, I'm sure it's an issue, but the very best players and the very best teams don't let it become an issue and don't look for excuses. So United can't use that either. Otherwise, they're never going to win anything, are they? Because they'll be tired if they're tired every May because they're going deep in competitions. Then, well, they're never going to win anything because
that's a very good point.
Yeah, that's my point as well.
You should be up for this
they need to get over it, basically. Yeah.
Ten Hag said yesterday that tiredness is in the mind, and if you want to be successful, you're going to be playing well into 50 plus games a season at the very least. And it was United's fault they didn't have 2-3 midweeks in February because they didn't top their Europa League group. Okay, with the Queen's death and the postponements of that did put a bit of a spanner in the works, and it made February particularly taxing. And of course, in January when they played Palace in the same week they played Arsenal, but that Palace game they should have won that. They were just coasting in that. That wasn't tiredness, dropping points that night. That was complacency. And Manchester City are going for a treble, and they're still swatting teams aside quite effortlessly because they're a brilliant football team, and also when they do make changes, and that's the key thing. When City make 4 changes, they just seem to play the same. If United make 4 changes, they play in a very different way. And I mean, United may never even get to that level, but that's the level they have to strive to get to, so that they can have a squad where Ten Hag is more trusting of players, and there are certain players who aren't necessarily first choices, but they are playing. They're getting enough minutes that that keep them happy, keep them content, and they're also contributing.
It's not easy to get to that level, especially for the period of 5-6 years as they've done it so consistently. Obviously, it's taken a lot of money, but Guardiola's done a fantastic job. We'll reluctantly praise the blue side of Manchester. Supporters won't like to hear that. Obviously, 1 point ahead of Liverpool. Samuel got a game in hand. Wolves, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Fulham still to play. If you had to wager and you had to place a bet, where's your confidence level in this team to secure top 4 and end the season strongly? Because, I mean, it's been a funny few months. I mean, January or February, I was saying they're nailed on for 3rd. I was trying to entertain, jokingly, some title talk. And all of a sudden, Liverpool are right here and they're 5th, right behind them.
They are, and as I said, it would be a colossal disaster for United if they finish outside the Champions League places, because it has felt like for quite some time they'd be secure there, and it's almost as if their season it's in danger of peaking in February, which is, I mean, that's dreadful. That would reflect horrendously on them. I mean, that's something that you'd associate with, I don't know, Swansea City when they won the League Cup in 2013. With them, you think fair enough if your season's peak in February with a cup win. But there has been, coincidence or not, there's been a drop off since that cup final, and look, that 7-0 thrashing by Liverpool. The ramifications of that may still be to come. Really, I mean, I think if you go back and look at that game, you look at United's form since then, I think they've not won more than 2 games on the spin across all competitions, and that tells you that that when the pressure does mount and you do get deeper into the competitions and there's more at stake, football does silly things to professional footballers, and it did silly things to United and they did silly things in Seville when they went out of the Europa League. The semi-final win against Brighton was extremely narrow. It was just on a penalty shootout, and they've their performance level since that Liverpool game in the defeats. The Newcastle defeat was a bad one. Sevilla was a bad one. Brighton was maybe it's more forgivable, and the manner of it was what really will have been quite bitter for Ten Hag. But they were after the first 26 minutes against West Ham, they were just so lackluster. And again, I think there is a mental fragility there. And Liverpool have won, was it 5 or 6 of their last 5 or 6 in the league. And I don't really look at their remaining fixtures. I don't really see them dropping points. I know Leicester away is a difficult one because Leicester need points on the board. They're trying to stay in the league, and Villa are due at Anfield. But maybe Villa's momentum. I mean, they've lost their last couple of games, so I think Europe now looks more of a long shot, and maybe they won't be able to qualify for Europe when that game comes along. But Liverpool, you have more faith in Liverpool to win their remaining games. I know they've not got as many games left as United, and for United, the objective remains the same. It's get 3 wins from those remaining games, and then they've got top 4. I would expect them to beat Wolves because Wolves have nothing to play for. They're safe in the Premier League now. Brighton will Bournemouth will probably be safe by the time United go down there. But then you've got United's away record. The Chelsea game's a real funny one. You're not quite sure what can happen there because Chelsea have got quality, but they have also been absolutely abysmal. But they did get a win at the weekend. What will they be in a better place come that game? It remains to be seen. Fulham on the final day, it should be relatively straightforward, but if there's something to play for that day, maybe the pressure tells again, and that's what you see with United. What you've seen with United in the last couple of months, it feels like when the pressure has been not even ramped up, but it's just risen a bit, they've started to wobble, and it's almost Jekyll and Hyde really at times with them, because in February they coped extremely well with 8 games in 26 days. I think in all 4 competitions they came through that month tremendously. They got the 2 big wins against Barcelona and Newcastle, but I genuinely feel as though there is an element of complacency there, that it's almost as if they thought, well, we've got the cup and we've got enough in the tank to get us through to top 4, and they've maybe underestimated some teams along the way. I mean, they certainly underestimated Sevilla in the first leg with the soccer aid substitutions and all that nonsense. So you can make a case for or against really with United to get in top 4 or not get in the top 4, but they're in danger of regressing, and that will be very difficult to take for the supporters and for Ten Hag, because Ten Hag has overseen a lot of progress this season, and for a long time it's felt like this is certain to be remembered as a successful season, but you can't be as certain now.
I'd agree with you. Your point you made about Liverpool, I fully expect them to win all their 3 games, actually, when you look at the fixtures. And I think it's going to go down to the last day to the wire. I mean, I kind of just think to that Tottenham game when they were cruising 2-0 up at half-time, so comfortable, and threw that away. And obviously he came out after the game and he said, you know what?
And he called it a good point as well.
Draw. And I took some stick on Twitter. Yeah, I said on Twitter, I said, look, probably not the best thing to say, Eric. And someone was like, look, within the context of a season, it's not a bad result. And fair point, I took that point. But when you're a manager of Manchester
United... It wasn't a fair point, Stephen. They were talking nonsense.
Well, within the context of a season, I got what they were trying to say. I did get what they were trying to say, but it could come back to bite them. That's the thing in a few weeks' time. It could be decided by a point. It could be Europa League, which would be a disaster. All right, we'll just be back in a moment. We'll end there for part 2. We'll be back in a moment for part 3. It has turned into a DISASTROUS special at the start, which we mumbled on. But we will look ahead to Wolves very briefly.
That's right.
Tyrone Samuel said, look, he probably expects it to be a straightforward assignment. They've got 40 points on the board, so barring an absolute miracle, they're going to be safe and they've retained their Premier League status. What are you expecting, and kind of what changes would you make for the game, if any? I presume maybe would you take Weghorst out of the team, or as we've said, you know what, his performance wasn't too bad, was it? That's the thing before he was brought off against West Ham.
Yeah, I mean, arguably the best United player on the pitch, and so he went off. Started the game really well. He was the player who bailed out De Gea for his pass straight to Declan Rice. But no, I don't think I'll be starting him. The other impact is that it has an impact on Fernandes. We talked about 3 strikers in a week. Fernandes in a week have played on the right wing, the left wing, and attacking midfield, and that's not ideal either. You've got arguably your most creative player there, playing in 3 very different positions in the space of 8 days, was it? So that's not ideal either. You want some kind of continuity, really. So no, I would go back to that Casemiro, Eriksen, and Fernandes in actual midfield, I think. And then I don't know, going forward.
Jack Butland.
Maybe Martial. I don't think I'll go with Jack Butland now. I think I'll go with De Gea still. And then, I'd probably Martial, I guess. But yeah, there's the concern for United is that, like I said before, you've got Casemiro and Eriksen playing as badly as they have all season. You've got no defenders, really. As well as Shaw and Lindelof have done, you've got no real options in defence. You're having to compromise a left back every time. I thought Malacia was okay yesterday, but he's not a patch on Shaw. And then no one has really scored goals apart from Rashford all season, and he's got one in his last 6 or one in his last 7 now, I think, which was a brilliant goal, but he's not looking like scoring as often as he did. So there's a few little issues that are piling up, but it is a free week for them. The first free week they've had, apart from an international break, since late December, I think. So you would hope if they are citing tiredness that this will be a chance to refresh a little bit. And like we said, they really should be beating Wolves at home. They've not lost at home since the opening day. And if they're not beating Wolves at home, then I think you are in big trouble for top 4. I think there would be alarm bells ringing then. But this is the type of game that they should be making pretty short work of you. You'd want a more convincing performance and a few goals, because, like we say, the goals have dried up a little bit. But yeah, I can't really see anything beyond a home win, because even at times when United have stumbled this year, when they've had poor performances, they've tended to get back to Old Trafford and get a win and sort of get back on the horse. And this week is the first time they've lost back-to-back games since the first 2 games of the season. So yeah, I would expect an improved performance, but I think they need it as well, because like I said, I would agree that I think they'll still get top 4, but if Liverpool were to keep winning and United drop points against Wolves or Bournemouth, if they went into that final week needing to beat Chelsea and Fulham at home to get top 4, then the pressure would really be on, because like we said, they've been in control of this top 4 race since they got in the top 4 at the end of December. So to suddenly need 2 wins in the final 4 days of the season, I think would be edgy indeed. So for me, that I wouldn't, they can't really afford to drop points against Wolves or Bournemouth, because they just can't put themselves in that situation.
Surely with the players looking a bit fatigued now, and I mean the attack looking stale, and Garnacho, lads, surely he's going to have a big part to play in these last kind of few weeks. And obviously he just came back from injury, but he does offer us something really different on the wing to the players like Anthony and Sancho, who prefer to kind of cut inside, and he's very direct, and it could work very well against Wolves, couldn't it? I think I'd be surprised not to see him off the bench anyways.
I think he's got an opportunity to stake his claim for a cup final starting spot. I still suspect that come that day, Ten Hag will see him as more useful off the bench, given his relative inexperience and that game-changing prowess he has as a substitute. You think of the goal against Fulham, the assist for Rashford against City in January, even the League Cup game against Villa. I think Garnacho came on, United were 2-1 down. He created 2 goals and they won 4-2. He scored against Leeds as a substitute. So it's a strange quandary Ten Hag has, is that he's got three left wingers aged 18, 23 and 27. Marshall can play on the left wing, on the left wing, but obviously he's mainly a striker. And all of them this season have had their best impacts as substitutes, really, and that's forgivable of Garnacho. He's 18. He barely made his debut a year ago, but Marshall's got 2 goals and 14 starts. 5 of his 7 goals this season have been as a substitute. I think it's only 2 of Sancho's 6 have come off the bench, but his best performance this season was as a second half substitute against Leicester in February. So come cup final day, it's not ideal, really, in that someone is probably going to be starting that Ten Hag would probably rather have on the bench to call upon in the second half. And the way that merry-go-round with the strike situation is going, it's a difficult one to play the percentages, because do you go with Marshall knowing that he's almost certainly not going to complete 90 minutes, and going off current form as well, he's not exactly scoring either. He's not in. It's been a while since you could say that Marshall is in good form for United. But is that the play and the percentages of it? Is that the best way to approach the game, and trying to think one step ahead as to when you can bring on Garnacho and bring on Sancho, because they are probably better options to bring into a game like that than Martial. And Martial did start, and he did okay against City for a half in the Old Trafford derby before he went off injured. So it's very easy to look ahead to the cup final, even though there are 4 very big games to come, because as I've said before, there are certain players that Ten Hag, he needs to give them some rhythm so that they are comfortable going into that final, and it's not a case of moving the pieces around all of a sudden for this one-off game, this absolutely massive game in Manchester football history. And there's also the chance that he'll make a tactical tweak that day, as he did for the win against City in January. But looking to the more immediate games, I certainly think that Garnacho, it'd be a surprise if he doesn't get 1 or 2 starts in the run-in. And Ten Hag laid down that challenge to him in March when he said it's time for you to start performing as a starter, because he hadn't really done it in domestic competition. Then he did do it against West Ham and he scored the winner in the cup game. He's not really done it as a starter in a Premier League game. I'm struggling to think of a match where he's lined up in the league and he's really properly excelled. So that's another challenge for him in the run-in. And if he gets that right, then maybe that would elevate him to a cup final starting place.
And he needs to be given the chance to play, because he's just got some brand new teeth, and he needs to show everyone those teeth. Really, you can't splash out on those gnashers and not get some photos for your Instagram. It'd be an absolute waste. Absolute waste.
He's looking like Ronaldo already, isn't he?
it's the start of the Ronaldo transformation, isn't it?
Yes,
walked past me in the mix zone. Walked past me in the mix zone when I just got there last night, and it was only the fact he was moving that made me realise I wasn't in Madame Tussauds, to be honest.
Well, you were blind as well as you walked past you, covering your thank you very much for your time, Samuel, as usual.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thank you, Tyrone.
Thank you.
And thanks to listeners as always. We'll be back on Friday. Obviously, there's no game this week. So check out YouTube as usual. All good audio platforms. We're on Spotify, Apple, etc. And have a fantastic week. We'll see you then.